Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by, that was the wimpiest drum roll ever, Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our new best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. You having fun? This is our first episode that we're recording in 2023. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
We have these like fancy mics and have to remember how to
What have you been up to?
And record things.
What have you been up to?
It's been fun. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
All right. So today we have a really cool guest. I'm so excited for this discussion. We have W. Curtis Preston, also known as Mr. Backup. He has specialized in designing data protection systems since 1993 and has designed such systems for some of the largest organizations in the world. His lively prose and wry, real-world approach has made him a popular author and speaker. He has written 4 O'Reilly books, the latest of which is Modern Data Protection, published in 2021. He is also the host of BackupCentral.com and its Restore It All podcast. He is now the chief technical evangelist for Druva, the only at-scale SaaS provider of data protection. Well, Curtis, we're so excited to have you here today.
I'm excited. I'm your first podcast recording of the year. I'm honored.
It's a great way to start the new year.
And Jody had a lot of coffee today, so she's quite perky.
I only had one little cup, but I'm really hungry because I haven't really eaten very much today.
And I'm sure that's my fault, but let's delve in. So, Curtis, how did your career evolve to your current role?
Well, I started like a lot of people that start in IT. I got the job that nobody else wanted, right? Which was the backup guy back at what at that time was the second largest credit card company in the U.S., MBNA. And that was back, as you said, in 1993, which, by the way, this month marks my 30-year anniversary in the space. And I actually tried to get out of backup, and I just kept literally falling into it. And eventually, then I realized I knew a lot about something that most people didn't, and started writing. And next thing you know, I'd written a book, and then I'd written more books. And about 5 years ago, but I had always been on the end user side, the company side, that were actually using the technology. And then 5 years ago, I decided to cross the other divide, and so I went to work for my first vendor, and that's Druva. So. That's a brief, 1-minute version of 30 years of time.
Well, congratulations on 30 years. Very exciting.
Thanks.
Now, if we think about where we are in prepping for this call, I thought this was a really interesting fact, how you were talking about ransomware and their focus and targeting of backups. If you can help explain to our audience a little bit more about how this actually works. So many people are just used to kind of the commonplace ransomware, as opposed to where they're focusing these days.
Right. So, there was ransomware V1, right? Which was, we're going to, get into your environment. We're going to encrypt the data, and then we're going to demand money in order for us to unencrypt the data. That's the old ransomware attack. What they've moved on is a two-phase attack, where they still do that, but then what they're looking for is a place to exfiltrate your data. Specifically unencrypted versions of your company's intellectual property, or something else embarrassing about your company, right? Maybe customer account data or whatever. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter really what they're able to exfiltrate, as long as it's something they can demand money. So they, it's either give us $1 million or we will release this embarrassing thing about your company, right? What they've realized is that the backup server is a prevention for the first type of attack, and a honeypot for the second type of attack. So they're realizing that if people have decent backup and recovery and disaster recovery systems, then they can say no to the ransom of the first type. But what they've also realized is that, in the first part of the call, I mentioned that, I got the job nobody else wanted. Well, for various reasons, backups are not the star quarterback of any IT department. And so the system is often ignored from a cybersecurity perspective, or quite often managed by someone who's relatively junior. And so the bad actors have realized that if they can get a hold of the backup server, they can if they can basically deactivate the backup server, it means it can't be used against them in the traditional attack. But even more interestingly is that the backup server holds a treasure trove of the data that they're trying to exfiltrate, and it's often not stored in the most secure way. And so that's why they're going after the backup server, either to deactivate it, to take it out of play of the traditional attack, or to use it to exfiltrate data. Instead of exfiltrating it directly, they're getting it from the backup server.
So I have a follow-up question, which is, are there any common ways that you're seeing how these attackers are getting to those servers?
I don't know if I'd say common. Basically, there are a series of ways. Either they're doing, they are gaining access credentials that through other means, right? Like hacking Active Directory, and they're gaining access credentials to the backup server. Or they are, there are vulnerabilities in some of the on-prem backup packages, right? In my world, I separate, there's on-prem backup software and SaaS-based backup software, which is what Druva does. So there are vulnerabilities. There were some, again, I don't want to mention vendors' names, but there were a handful that were announced recently on one of our main competitors. So there are direct exploits. And then finally, I would say that there are traditional, basically privilege escalation attacks that a lot of the designs, especially two big companies, use Windows as their main OS for the backup server. And a lot of, basically, if you're able to escalate your privileges to administrator in Windows, all bets are off from the security of the backup system. And so that's another way that they're able to do.
So can you talk a little bit about Druva and how it's different from other vendors in the space that say they have SaaS?
Yeah, so there are, so, if you go back, like I've been at the company 5 years, and when I first got here, the famous Gretzky phrase of skating where the puck is going, right? Basically he's like, that was what you needed to do. You needed to skate to where the puck is going.
Jody, do you know who Gretzky was?
Yes, but thank you.
Just asking.
I know that sports might not be my forte, but that doesn't mean I'm a total dummy.
For the record, it's not my forte either, but I knew the quote before I even knew where it came from, by the way. But that's the way we were for a long time. We were the main, if not the only, you could say, SaaS-based provider of data protection. And then in the last year or two, a bunch of other companies have gotten into and by the way, back then I had to explain what that meant, right? I used to say, what you know what Microsoft 365 is, right? They're like, yes, well, we're like that, but for backups, right? I had to explain what that meant. Well, now there are a handful of our, many of our competitors have gotten into the SaaS-based business, but what they did, the way they got into the business was by lifting and shifting their on-prem architecture into the cloud, right? So, basically there's a very big difference from designing and coding your infrastructure specifically for a cloud vendor and basically moving a VM into the cloud. And that's what our competitors have done. And there are significant cost differences. And since we're talking about cybersecurity differences, right? Basically, the attacks that you would leverage to attack an on-prem system are basically the same attacks that you would use to attack that same system if it's been moved into the cloud, if all you did was lift and shift, right?
So, Curtis, I kind of have a follow-up question on the whole notion of backups having handled a variety of incident response engagements. And typically what I see is either they don't have backups, they have partial backups, meaning we have everything except, whoops, forgot to back up our largest customer, so we're going to be paying. Or even if they have the backups, they never test them, so they decide, you know what, it's just easier to pay, even if files are corrupted, rather than get our backup. So is this still, from your perspective, the state of affairs, or are things starting to change given all the executive orders that came out last year and some of the other regulations that are being talked about?
I think that the ransomware attacks of the last, I'm going to say 6 years. So I remember 2014 I was thinking it was 2020. Sorry, I had 7 years, 8, 9. Crap, I'm doing math in my head.
It's early January. It's okay. We're all still confused.
Yeah. So 9 years, by the way, 2014 to 2023. The last 9 years, I think, have caused a lot of people to revisit their specifically their DR plans, right? Which a DR plan is going to rely on the backup plan. And I think, and I would also say that a variety of, not all, but there are newer players in the backup market, one of which is Druva, that have made things easier, right? So when it's easier to do automatic selection of servers, for example, when you're a VMware shop, for example, and you can just say, look, automatically back up every new VMware VM wherever it shows up. When you can do that, it's so much better than when I joined the industry and I had to get a memo, right? There's a new server and I had to get a memo that there's a new server, or else that server wouldn't be backed up, right? So it has gotten easier. And if you're using newer technology, to basically at least make sure everything's protected, number one, that was sort of what you were, the first two you talked about was just people not even being sure that all their data is being protected. So I think it's easier to do that. And then the third one about not testing, the cloud has made testing a lot easier, a lot more feasible. You still have to know to do it. You still have to conduct a recovery test, right? But, for example, with Druva, you can do a full DR test with a single click of a button. And, and we don't charge extra for those tests, right? And you can do that. If you can automate your DR test to that point, again, contrasting that to the way it was when we did a DR test at the bank, it was, 30 people for an entire weekend to recover a handful of our servers. Now you can just push a button and restore your entire environment, with one person. And so I think that if you're using newer technology, there's really no excuse for not testing other than just laziness. It's not the cost and huge logistical nightmare that it was 30 years ago.
So what might you suggest to an organization looking for a SaaS service for data protection and resilience? What should they be looking for?
Well, I would first, we're talking a lot about cybersecurity. I would first ask them how their data is protected from a cybersecurity perspective, right? How is it protected from a ransomware attack? How is it protected? If you move to a SaaS-based provider, your biggest risk, remember that I think when you ask me how are people doing it, is it was getting a hold of access credentials, right? If you're using a SaaS-based data protection provider, your biggest risk is probably that someone gaining access to your username and password that is the controlling account for your backup provider. Ask your vendor what happens if somebody gains access to your main account and then goes in and deletes all your backup configurations, or worse yet, deletes all your backups. How does their product respond to that? Many of the products don't have an answer to that. I know we do. Some of our competitors do. Because that's another one of the attacks, again, from a ransomware perspective, or just a disgruntled employee perspective. I'm going to show you, I'm going to log into the backup account and I'm going to delete all of the backups, right? And this is why I used to, and then also ask them what they do from a least privilege standpoint, right? How are they limiting the blast radius of each employee who's running the backup system? Are you able to separate, like the person that creates the backups from the person that runs the backups, for example, right? And then finally, ask them about cost, right? Because ask them about how predictable the costs are and what happens if significant changes happen in your environment. So for example, if you sell off half your company, you decide you're no longer in the, I don't know, whatever business, and you sell that part of your company off and half your data center leaves with it. Do your costs go down? If they don't, my opinion, that's not really a SaaS provider. That's my opinion, but whatever.
Well, your opinion is valued and we appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think our listeners will as well.
Do you know the best Wayne Gretzky quote? It's marketing.
I don't, but I know you're going to tell us.
Yes. Miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Oh, see, I know that.
Right.
You say it 400 times a day.
There you have it.
Our kids know it well.
So, Curtis, kind of changing a little bit to the current kind of regulatory environment around cybersecurity. We had a series of executive orders from CISA and the Biden administration around breach reporting requirements. There's some new SEC regulations that are likely coming final in the next month or two. How do you think these regulations are going to start to impact both public companies as well as those private companies in their supply chain needing better cyber health and incentivize them to really pay attention to having good backups, testing our backups? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I hearken back to many years ago where California passed a new law that required companies to disclose if they had if personal information of their customers had been exposed, and suddenly you saw all these breaches that were being notified, publicly. There were so many, it became a jeopardy category, right? Somewhere I've got the clip that there was a jeopardy category of all of these breaches that happened in a single year. And it's not like suddenly breaches started happening. it's because suddenly they were required by California law to tell us. I expect a similar explosion. I don't know if that's the right word, but in notifications from companies after hopefully these rules go into effect. Companies, they just don't. Obviously they don't want to notify. I'm thinking about there are two. The one that's coming to mind is the Rackspace outage that happened December 2nd. And there's another company whose name is escaping me at the moment. LastPass. So these are two companies who both had hacks. One was incredibly forthcoming in how the hack happened, what was accessed, what wasn't accessed. The other, they've been opaque as milk, right? They're not saying anything. And I think that if these SEC rules force public companies to report on exposures like this and hacks, then I think hopefully more companies will be like the way LastPass has responded and not the way Rackspace did.
You're right. I think you often find regulation tends to push people to do things that they don't always, have to do before. And then people become more aware of it. And I think that's when change will continue to happen. I like to think that change will happen with just being good company people, but some won't do it that way.
So, Jody, which will happen first, federal privacy law or federal cybersecurity law?
That's a interesting question that I don't like to gamble, so I don't know. It's a toss-up. I think it depends on which company is going to scream the loudest. And it could be that a lot of big companies don't like these new disclosures and want some kind of standard. But then you also have a lot of states who are continuing to pass laws, and it's really whichever political person's going to win. And company is going to, I don't know. I can't answer. I'm not voting.
I've stumped you.
I'm not voting.
The reason I bring it up.
I'll vote.
Okay, what's your
vote? Thoughts?
I'll say the cybersecurity one because I think it's the privacy law, which by the way I'm behind as well. The idea of the privacy law, it impacts every single company every single day, whereas the cybersecurity law, it allows a company to go, well, it won't be us, and it'll only impact us once, right? Versus the privacy law impacts every single company every single day. So I think the cybersecurity law will go first.
Those are good arguments for the cybersecurity law.
Well, remember with state laws, you have, including Guam and Puerto Rico, 52 different breach notification laws. And so the question is, as these privacy laws proliferate, which, as I like to say, privacy and cybersecurity are the peanut butter and jelly of technology. What does that do for all these companies who are trying to navigate this patched quilt of state laws when it comes to privacy and security? Does that then motivate the federal government to get their act together? That's what I think.
Well, it did. And we had a bill and then it didn't pass. But we could have a whole episode on that one, and I'm going to reel us back in.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've gone down a tangent and I've been slapped.
It is okay.
Metaphorically.
So, Curtis, perhaps in your universe, you talk about privacy and security all day long, just like we do over here, as you can tell, riveting conversations. So when you are out and about and people know what you do, what is the best cybersecurity tip that you would offer people?
Well, these are companies, not consumers.
You can answer it either way.
It's a broad question. It can be for consumers or for business.
Yeah, I'd say one that goes for both is I am a huge proponent of password managers. Okay. Not LastPass. I think LastPass days are over, but that's again another discussion for a whole because of multiple breaches, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm a huge proponent of password managers. And I'm a huge proponent of MFA everywhere all the time. And if you're a company and you have accounts that matter at all, they should be protected by MFA. If you're a person and you're working with banks or places where you can buy things, right? I mean, I don't care so much if you're, I don't know, I can't think of if your account that doesn't store any of your data doesn't have MFA. I don't care so much about that. But if it's a place where you can buy things or, withdraw things, please activate. The only thing that stinks about, one of the things that stinks about MFA is that it's optional at many places. Well, if it's optional, please select that option. And if you're a company, please start requiring that option, right? So I would say, use a password manager to get a unique password and make those passwords. The beauty of using a password manager is you can make the password ginormous, right? You can make it 20, 30 characters, and it doesn't matter because it's just going to copy and paste it. It doesn't matter how big it is. So, you have a unique password everywhere, and then use some sort of MFA system. I am a proponent of, good is better than nothing. Something is better than nothing. So even if you're just using SMS authentication, that's better than nothing. But I would prefer, if you're okay with using something like Google Authenticator or I'm a proponent of Authy, then that's better than that. So those are my two cybersecurity tips for.
So Curtis, when you're not working on being Mr. Backup and writing all of your books, what do you like to do for fun?
I'm a huge barbecue person. And by barbecue, let me define barbecue. That is not a grill in the backyard. That is grilling. Barbecuing means smoking. So I make a mean brisket. And I think it rivals what you would get if you went in Texas. Great ribs, pulled pork if I'm asked for it. Yeah, I love doing that and sort of perfecting that. So much so that it may be my retirement income. We'll see. But yeah, I enjoy it.
Maybe
I'm also a big DIY person. I just literally finished the largest DIY project I've ever undertaken, and that is I put down vinyl planking, the luxury vinyl planks. That's what they call it, right?
Yep.
In my whole house.
Wow, this is a huge project.
6 months. I will tell you two things. One is I'm not going to do the second floor. I did the first floor because I committed to that. I'm like, damn it, I'm going to finish this thing if it kills me. And it will be the last time I do it. There were a number of times. The main problem is you're on your hands and knees the entire time. And the number of times I said, I'm too old for this blank, over the last 6 months was a few.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure those floors look beautiful. And if people wanted to learn more about your flooring capabilities, your barbecue, your books, or backup, where should we send them?
So if they'd like a free copy of my latest O'Reilly book, they can go to druva.com/ebook. And if they want to talk to me personally, I'm wcurtispreston@gmail or @WCPreston on Twitter, as long as Twitter stays up.
Well, thank you so much. We learned a significant amount. We're delighted to have this discussion to help companies prepare and protect their assets more.
Anytime.
Closing remarks, Mr. Quote Man.
I'm looking forward to Curtis's next book, Curtis on Barbecue.
Oh, that's a good one.
I am writing a new book on ransomware, by the way.
Soon it'll be barbecue.
Yeah, less competition in the ransomware space, but barbecue way too much. By the way, I'll give you another on top of your quote about the missing 100% of the shots you don't take. Quitters never win and winners never quit, but those that never win and never quit are idiots.
Very, very nice.
That's from a company called despair.com, which makes demotivation posters. They crack me up.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.